We live and work with the mindset, whether consciously or subconsciously, that we can get it all done, that technology is going to work perfectly, that meeting is going to be efficient. And so we are not as intentional, I don't believe, in planning how we're going to use our time. And then you start adding in our lack of clarity about the goals, the outcomes we want. I just think it creates a perfect storm where we just start going, what happened here?
Welcome to Get Unstuck and On Target, the weekly podcast that offers senior leaders insights and strategies to not only lead with confidence and vision, but also to achieve groundbreaking results. I'm your host, Mike O'Neill. I coach top-level executives on the power of ethical leadership to forge teams to be as united as they are effective. In each episode, join me for insightful conversations with leaders just like you, providing practical advice to help you get unstuck and propel you and your company forward. Let's get started. Joining me is Jones Loflin. Jones is a speaker, a trainer, and an author. He helps individuals and organizations find their way forward when they're struggling with too much to do. In his 30-plus years as a speaker, he's helped countless people make better choices with their time so they can thrive in their work and life. Jones is the author or co-author of 4 books, including Always Growing, Juggling Elephants, and Getting to It. And it's that topic of struggling with too much to do that we'll probably spend most of our time on. Welcome, Jones.
Oh, Mike, what an honor to be a part of the podcast with you today. I enjoy what you do, how you do it, and looking forward to a lively conversation today where we give your listeners some tips and ideas on getting unstuck and figuring out how to handle too much to do.
I think this topic that we're going to be discussing is timely anytime, but as folks probably know, we're recording this podcast towards the end of December, but it really won't probably air until it may be close to March. And it just seems to me that, January, we all kind of make our resolutions. February, we begin to, oh gosh, by the time March comes along, in your work, you've been doing this for a long time, and we're talking about struggling with too much to do. What is it about us that we take on or feel that we're just overwhelmed? Why do we tend to do that to ourselves?
Yeah. It's so common, Mike. And I think the number one reason, there's a number of reasons. I think the number one reason, we live and work with the mindset, whether consciously or subconsciously, that we can get it all done. There's going to be enough hours in the day, that technology is going to work perfectly, that meeting is going to be efficient and take care of all the challenges that we have going on. And so we are not as intentional, I don't believe, in planning how we're going to use our time. And so then we just start getting overloaded because things aren't as efficient as we thought they were going to be. And then you start adding in our lack of clarity about the goals, the outcomes we want. I just think it creates a perfect storm where we just start going, what happened here? And it didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, incrementally. We kept adding a little bit, especially when you get to this time of year, when you started out the year with really clear goals. And then you, in a moment of emotion or something, you grabbed onto something else and you added something else. And then all of a sudden you're overloaded.
That notion of overloading, I want to go back to something that I picked up in your bio, and it reads, Jones believes in the key that key to success is being passionate about certain things in life, including family, spiritual beliefs, career, and relationships. Could we start with that? Passionate. Sure. That word passion, you read it and you kind of go, So when you write being passionate about certain things, let's start there. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. If you're passionate about something, it's front of mind for you. It's a filter for everything that you do and every choice you make. And so when I say passionate about certain things in life, like family, that means that every day when I start making choices of how I'm going to use my time, when I'm setting my goals, family is one of those elements that I'm going, okay, what do I want that to look like today, this week, this year? So I think you can take any of those elements, whether it's career, relationships. If I'm passionate about it, then I'm going to figure out what are the activities I want to engage in. What are the things I'm going to say no to that are going to allow me to remain passionate about those elements in my life. It's not a checklist or just a matter of fact. There's energy, there's emotion behind the choices that are made because you know what's important to you.
You just used the word choice, and what I have read in some of the material that you've made available is this idea of the problem is not time management, it's choice management. Yes. I love that. Tell me, how have you come to that as being one of the bedrocks of what you do?
Sure. First of all, that whole idea, I got started on when I was reading a book by Charlie Gilkey called Start Finishing. And he writes in the book that, time cannot be managed. Schedules can be managed. Energy can be managed. Meetings can be managed, but time can only be accounted for. I thought, wow, that's profound. And so I thought, well, what is it that we could get better at? And I do believe it's about the choices we make every day. Mike, I'll give you a simple example. Many people start their day by making the choice to pick up their phone, to scroll through social media, look at text, emails, different things like that. And that's a choice that has allowed people with lots of different priorities and values to influence how you're looking at your day. On the other hand, if you made the choice to start your day, even while you're lying in bed, and say, what's the outcome I want from today? What are my goals? What's front of mind for me? And starting your day from there, I think that's a much better choice to make in how to start your day. And then there's just so many choices we make throughout the day where I think if we take that moment to say, what is it I want from this moment, this time that I have, versus allowing it to be so influenced by others who don't have a clear idea of your purpose, your goals, your priorities, your values. I think that's a great place to start.
You mentioned the intentionality, and it starts literally at your waking moment. For those who are watching this on YouTube, you will see in Jones's background some stuff on the wall. And one obviously catches my attention is what appears to be a light bulb. It's a lit up light bulb. And I'm making a connection that might not be there. You might just like light bulbs, but I'm mindful of, you strike me as someone who's always learning. But tell me, what's the significance? Why did you choose the light bulb to be over your right shoulder?
It really is just about ideas, because, light bulbs just give us, it's an idea. And so it's just a part of what I like to have as a reminder, because I'm looking at it as well, going, it's about ideas. And of course, the map on the other side. I love to travel. I think, we've always traveled with our children, and I think that's important to help them have a big world view about things. Going back to something you said a moment ago, Mike, you mentioned about learner and enjoying learning. I took StrengthsFinders for the first time. Can you believe that? I'm behind, right? But I took StrengthsFinders assessment probably 4 months ago, and lo and behold, my first number one strength is learner. And I'd always wondered why I have this insatiable desire just to learn about things. I mean, whether it's, noticing like you did something on somebody's background, whether it's a new book or whether it's a conversation, I just love learning. And so that was an aha for me to go, okay, now I understand why I sometimes have to say, you know what, I got to stop reading now because I could just read all day, or I could go down a rabbit trail with this article I just found because it's fascinating. So that's one of the elephants that I have to manage in my world that keeps me from getting too far in one direction or another.
I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, though you mentioned the word elephants. But what kind of caught my attention, though, is that your love for learning and new ideas. But you said something else that I'd love to follow up, and that is when you travel, you are forced to begin looking at the world through a new set of eyes. And I don't know if this has been your experience, but it seems as if with the way the information is coming at us, we have a tendency sometimes to choose how we get our information. And if we limit how we get information, we may be limiting our perspectives. That's maybe not what you were trying to say there, but in your travels, in what ways have meeting people from all over the world, how has that changed who you are and how you do what you do for your clients and for your audiences?
Yeah. I think at its most basic level, it's taught me to really try to make it a priority to understand the perspective that other person's coming from. What's the history? What's the the background that causes them to have this attitude or that attitude? You talk about, I'll give you an example. Came to mind when you said that. I guess about a year and a half ago, my family and I traveled to Hawaii, and we were there on the North Shore. We were visiting. We were at a resort. My daughter was wanting to learn to surf and those things. And somebody who's a local construction worker happened to see us there. And you can tell I love to strike up conversations with people. And so I just said hello and different things. And so he started talking, and it was amazing as I listened to him talk about the pressures that many of the locals in Hawaii face because of development, and he was talking about the side of the island they have to live on and different things. And he wasn't complaining because he says, hey, if you all weren't here, we wouldn't be able to have the livelihoods that we have for many of us. But that was one of those examples where just having a conversation with someone really opened my eyes to kind of what's happening there or what's happening with someone. And we may have one picture, but when you start talking to somebody who's local, you get another picture. I could tell you about stories when I've been to Poland and talking to factory workers there and their view of America. I was in Quebec City, Canada last week, and one of our tour guides was talking about history, and she was telling me, did you know this happened in U.S. during this date? And I looked at her, and before I could even answer, she goes, no, you don't, because you don't know your own history. We know more about your history than you do. Now, I pushed back a little, but she was right, and so again, I think it goes back to what are you engaging in that opens you to new ideas? Are you listening to counter viewpoints? I mean, I'll take us down a rabbit hole, different one, Mike, is that I think when it comes even to news, I am not, aligned with any one particular. I mean, I listen to different viewpoints, and then from all of those, I think I can kind of get a more robust picture of what's going on in a situation. So I think it's important, whether it's travel or reading or whatever it is you're doing, not just to find things that affirm what you already know, but they challenge what you know, because I think that's how we grow.
I introduce you as a speaker, a trainer, and author. Let's talk about your role kind of as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, at least from my perspective, an effective coach is going to be able to offer fresh perspectives. But the recurring theme of what you do is, what do you do when you sense that you're struggling with too much to do? When you're working with either individuals or teams on that very issue, how does one start? What's that first thing that you try to do to get the conversation and get the process going?
Oh, you're going to love this, Mike. And it's something all of your listeners can use anytime they want. Whether I'm starting a keynote or whether it's a coaching session or a training session, I always start with this question. In your drive to get it all done, what's not getting done or getting done well? And if I'm in a keynote environment, I'll actually have people, break up into groups of 3 or 4 and have them talk about it for 90 seconds or 2 minutes. If it's a coaching session, I'll allow the person to give me some thoughts and ideas on that. But it's fascinating how people, when they're stopped, when they have no choice but to go, what isn't getting done? And then, in fact, you notice I said, or done well. I used to just ask the question in your drive to get it all done, what's not getting done? And then somebody challenged me one time and said, well, I'm doing it. It's just not good enough. I'm like, all right, let's add to that question. But that's the starting off point. When I talk with clients who come to me who are overloaded or overwhelmed, struggling with too much to do, it feels so generic because I'll say, well, what's feeling heavy to you right now? Everything. I'm like, well, I can't help with everything. I said, let's start with one at a time. Let's get to the foundation. And that question helps them to get there. Because for some people might say, Jones, I'm not getting the strategy stuff at work. I'm just kind of putting out fires all day. For some people, they'll say, Jones, I'm just not building relationships with my family or coworkers that I'd like to because I'm so busy. And then some will say, Jones, I'm not taking care of myself. I had one person who told me some time back, they said, I'd like to be able to sit on the couch for 30 minutes and not feel guilty about it.
Mm.
So I think that's where you jump off. You got to stop and assess what's not getting done. You say you want a better life, or you say you want to be more successful at work. You can say, what does that look like? I mean, you're a coach, that's a powerful question to ask. I think another way to get into it is asking that question about what's not getting done.
Is there a pattern that you see kind of emerges when you ask that question and they do breakouts, or like, do you find one, they're thinking about it maybe for the first time or for the first time in a while? Do they, from a clarity standpoint, does it come clear, or do they sometimes have to work on figuring out what really is weighing them the most?
That's a great question. I think what I see most often is that there's always something that's front of mind for them. And then as they hear other people talk, they kind of start making their list longer. A common place that people will start when they say, well, it's not getting done, they'll look and they'll go, time for me, time for me, time for my own personal wellness, self-care. But I think that's where I see most people immediately connect with, because they're just so hungry for it. They've been taking care of everybody else, and they've just not been taking care of their own needs. And you see that as, you're an executive coach. You see that with leaders. They're so mentally and emotionally drained because they've just been taking care of problem after problem and helping other people who are struggling too much to do. And they've never, or rarely do they stop and go, what do I need right now to be at my best? So that's where I see people start, and then it just blossoms as they hear other people say, yeah, I'm not getting to that either. I'm not getting to that either. In fact, I'll say this, there's a fun moment about 15 minutes into my keynote where, I say, we need to do something different to change the energy in this room, because I go through a list of ways they might be overloaded, and I go through things they're not getting done. And I always joke, I say, yeah, you're looking at the meeting planner going, why did we bring this guy in? And I'll say, let's just change it for a moment. And I said, I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them someone who's pleased with the work you're doing, the relationship you have with them, or the life you're living. And I said, I want you to tell them who that person is. And you hear this, you just feel this amazing change in the room as people start talking about, my boss, my supervisor, my colleague, my kids, my spouse, and some people who say, my dog. And I'm like, hey, we'll take that, And the reason I think that's important is because I think way too often we beat ourselves up for what's not getting done instead of taking that moment to celebrate what is getting done. The good stuff, because there's always good stuff happening, but we're so focused on what's not getting done that we're not taking a moment to celebrate that. And that's energizing. And once you start thinking, so-and-so is pleased with the work I'm doing. So-and-so is pleased. Okay, good. I can handle this. I can do this. So I think it's a great first step to then launching into, improving your routines, taking more control where you can, working with people differently, those types of things.
I know you detailed these in your books. I'd like to go back to your keynote for a moment, because it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I was about to ask you is, you've got an audience, some type of event planner vetted you, brought you in, and you are given X amount. And by the way, your typical keynote lasts about how long?
Usually it's 60 to 90. I know a lot of people not a lot of people might have a 45, but I really like a 60 to 90 because I do want people to talk to each other. One of the most amazing things that happens in a presentation is, or when people are talking, is they look across at the other person and go, oh, what? You too? I thought I was the only one who struggled with that. And so it's very affirming to them that they're normal, and gives them the opportunity to talk more in depth about it. So yeah, about 60 to 90 minutes.
So if you have 90 minutes, you have a captive audience, you have fine-tuned based on what you've learned from your audience, what works. Where I guess I'm going with this is this notion of overwhelm. They may have a positive experience in that 60 to 90 minutes. They might learn something. But what have you found that when you challenge your audience to go and do helps these things that you shared, how it can make it stick?
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Make it stick, because that's what we want. I have meeting planners tell me that, is that I want, Jones, I want them to walk away with stuff. I don't want them just to feel good or to feel. I want them to walk away with stuff. So I'll give you an example of a couple strategies from a typical keynote. Of course, I wrap this around managing your work and life like it's a circus. And so one of the elements of that is that you're the ringmaster of your circus. That doesn't mean you're in control of everything, but it is recognizing where do you have the opportunity to have control or influence that you're not taking. And what I mean by that is for them to begin assessing, where am I not using my time as wisely as I could? And so I think that's a good starting point for people, because you can do that anytime. Where am I not being a good ringmaster of my circus? It's one of the questions I ask. Another one is a strategy that I developed a few years ago to help people remember in those moments when they're overloaded. How do I create that 15 minutes? How do I create that 30 minutes? How do I create that space to get to those longer term things? And it's a strategy called TAD, T-A-D. And so I'll look at it and say, we're going to help you find a TAD. Great Southern term there. I use that a lot growing up. Where could you find a tad more time? The T stands for transfer. What could you transfer to someone else, all or in part, to create some space? Now, some people are going, that sounds like delegate. Well, it is, but then the acronym would make no sense, in that way. So I like transfer.
Would be dad.
It'd be dad. Before you can find a dad more time. A is automate. One of the things that I find when people are feeling overloaded, there's so many choices they're trying to make. Going back to my, foundation of that. And there's so many that they're making what I call an analog. They're having to think about it. What are those things you could automate in your day or in your week so they happen at a predetermined time or in a chronological part of your day so that you're not thinking about them? That could be exercise. It could be managing your email, whatever it might be. The D is drop. And what's something you could stop doing? What's something you could drop? And then after I introduce that concept, I'll say, okay, I want you to turn to the person next to you, and I want you to share something that you could transfer, automate, or drop that would create 15 minutes a day or 30 minutes a week of space for you. And Mike, I got to tell you, I have never had anyone look at me and go, I can't think of a thing. And they might have been thinking that, but when I get responses from the audience, it's fascinating, because we all have those things that we're doing that aren't efficient uses of our time, or that somebody else should be doing in some way.
I made reference to what's in your background. I recently made a change, but if you had pulled the camera back, what I would have over my shoulder out of camera range, and I did this for a number of years, is I actually had a Lego circus. And the ringmaster, I did not know this, but the ringmaster, I kind of put my own company logo on it because it was a way to reinforce that I have to fulfill that. Can you just go ahead and elaborate for those who have not read your book yet, a little bit about that notion and how ringmaster factors so prominently in your teaching?
Yeah. I got to tell you a funny story. I was talking to a group, and I asked, one of the things I'll ask people, I'll just look out of the audience, how many of you would say you are the ringmaster of your circus? And, you'll get a certain number of people raise their hand. Never forget one conference I was speaking at, husband and wife were on the front row. I asked that question. How many of you say you're the ringmaster of your circus? The husband raised his hand. His wife looked at him and he put it down. And so, I don't think that's the challenge for most of us. I think for most of us, we just have this desire to have control of everything. When we feel so out of control, if we're not in control of everything. And so I always like to start there with that idea of control, as I mentioned a moment ago, because in the circus, a ringmaster would never go to the animal trainer and say, hey, Mr. Animal Trainer, you take the day off. I'll work with the animals. They do that once, and they're going to need a new ringmaster. The role of the ringmaster is to, help plan the lineup. It's to help the circus act with purpose. It's to identify where in the lineup things could improve, what needs to be changed, what could be different, to determine when the acts come into the lineup, if you will. And so there's a whole host of things that I think when someone looks at their life situation and goes, yeah, I'm the ringmaster of my circus, there's a lot of practical tips that they can begin to glean, even to the standpoint of people who argue with me and say, well, I don't think I'm the ringmaster of the circus. And I'll say, okay, who or what is.
Mm.
And then they'll list some things. And I say, do they know what your values are? Do they know what your goals are? Do they know what the outcomes you're looking for are? And they'll go, no. Is that safe? Are you comfortable allowing that thing or that person or that group of people to control, your actions or reactions and the way you're planning your day? And most people, when they're challenged to stop, will go, no, I want to be the ringmaster of my circus. Great. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And then that leads us into the discussion about planning your lineup, planning the activities you're going to put into your day.
Joseph, we've been kind of talking. I've been trying to think of examples, and you can probably fill that void far better than I can. And that is, in your work, you've been doing this for quite some time. I suspect it resonates with just about everybody. But this idea of getting stuck, can you share an example where perhaps you got stuck, a client or an organization you were working with got stuck? And when that happened, what did it take to get unstuck?
Yeah. I'll protect this person as a coach. That's important. We'll say his name's Doug. Okay. Doug came to me. Doug is a teacher and is also got a lot of different things going on in his life. He's in that sandwich situation where he's got kids just reaching the edge of adulthood, so he's really active there. He also his mom is still alive and having some health issues. He was also pastoring, part-time pastoring a church at the same time. And Doug came to me after hearing my keynote. He gave me a list of his 13 elephants. And I appreciated that. And so it was interesting because he felt stuck. He says, Jones, I'm just burned out every day when I try to teach. I just have no energy for things in my life. And so it was really easy with Doug because I said, okay, Doug, let's look at these 13 elephants. Which one could you most immediately address to get some breathing room?
Yeah.
And he could do that. But you know what? He hadn't been asked the question. He felt like he had to get it all done. Yeah. And nobody had stopped and said, hey, you know what, Doug, this is not happening for you now. Then how are you going to add more to your life? Because you're talking about other things he wanted to do. And so Doug began to see that, what he need, what I need to do? I need to learn to say no. And so we even coached through some conversations he could have with certain responsibilities in his life. We also talked about some things that maybe he could hire out and have someone else to do. And it was rewarding after just a month that Doug was in a better place because somebody had stopped him and helped him identify where the pressure was coming from, and it enabled him to take some steps to get to a better place. And as a coach, it wasn't about giving him the answers. Doug knew what he wanted to do. He just didn't have anybody who would sit with him and help him say, okay, here's step number one, or what is step number one? Because so many of us want the quick fix, right? We want that quick fix of saying, okay, if I just work 5 more hours, 3 times a week, or if I lose some sleep, or if I get a better, electronic way of managing my time, when the answer for many people is no, you need to stop and say, you're trying to do too many things, aren't you? Okay, what could we take out? What could we do differently? What could we make more efficient to get those quick wins, to get that motivation to address the bigger challenges they face? So I know that's kind of a ramble, but as you talk about an example, that's one that comes to mind for me.
Well, it's not a ramble at all because you just perfectly illustrated it. Definitely 2 of the 3 points of TAD. You helped Doug with transfer, working through that. Automate you might have, but then you did ask the question, what could you drop? So that's a perfect example of how what you write about, you speak about, you're able to use on a one-on-one basis with Doug. Jones, we've had an opportunity to kind of talk about a variety of things. There's so many things we actually could, and I would love to have done so. But as you reflect on not only what we have discussed, but kind of your life's work, what do you want those watching, those listening, what do you want them to really take away from this conversation?
Wow. Mike, I think the first thing is I would encourage your listeners to invest some time in reflecting on what's important to them. I'm talking getting away from the noise, from the technology, and just really being, not doing, but being. And ask yourself some of those deeper questions. What are my values? How am I honoring my values in my life? How am I not honoring my values? What are some things that I'm not getting to that I want to get to, that, in your drive to get it all done type of thing. And then to start asking themselves, how could I take a first step? What is something I could do different? What's that small routine, that I could develop to be able to take that next step to address that point of pressure or something that's bothering me or frustrating me because it's not happening as it should? Because that it's those little consistent habits that we do over time that will make the biggest difference. You didn't get overwhelmed and overloaded overnight. You're not going to get out of it overnight either. It's going to take that intentional effort of the choices you make every day to get you to that better place that will relieve so much of the pressure and the frustration and help you to be more fully present with the people in front of you, do the longer term work, and be happier with who you are as a human being.
Jones, for those who are listening and they want to learn more or maybe reach out to you directly, what's the best way for folks to do so?
Sure. Thanks for asking, Mike. Of course, I would encourage them to start with my website, jonesloflin.com. There you'll find a number of resources to be of value to you. I also have a weekly video series that I put out to my subscriber list. There's a place on the website there if you'd like to sign up for that. I know many of your listeners are active on LinkedIn. That's my social media platform of choice. And so I post content there every day. Today, I might post a book recommendation. Next week, it might be, information about work-life overload or something I learned somewhere else. But I would love for your listeners to connect with me there so they can get a chance to see that content. And also I can learn more about them. And perhaps at some point in the future, our paths cross in some way.
I've had a conversation with Jones Loflin, Loflin, and we will include that contact information in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't worry about it. It's in the show notes. You can actually kind of get it. Jones, what a treat. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate the work you're doing and help people get unstuck, and look forward to a future conversation.
Well, I want to wrap up this podcast by just asking our listeners a question, and that is, are people following you because they have to, because they want to? As a leadership coach, I work with executives who have a track record of success behind them, but they're now feeling stuck. They're frustrated because they're finding out that with each level of success that follows, the bar, it's set even higher. And they get discouraged because what worked in the past is no longer working. Well, if feeling stuck describes you or someone you know, let's talk. You just go to our website, bench-builders.com, to schedule a call. So I want to thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have picked up on some quick wins from Jones that will help you get unstuck and on target. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Get Unstuck and On Target. I hope you've gained insights to help you lead with confidence and drive your organization forward. Remember, at Bench Builders, we're committed to your success, your leadership excellence, and your strategic growth. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, please leave a review, rate, and subscribe to keep up with our latest episodes. This show really grows when listeners like you share it with others. Who do you know who needs to hear what we talked about today? Until next time, I encourage you to stay focused on the target and continue to break new ground on your leadership path.